during this time that you were, Lou's father is Bill, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Was Bill preaching socialism onto you, or
Oh,
how did you even,
absolutely.
into this?
Bill Hull was the one who taught me that women had rights. We would sit and discuss and argue. He kind of used me as a sounding board, and he educated me to the fact that women had rights. Before that, I thought my mother was terrible because I didn't think she treated my father right. And it took me a long time before I realized that she had lived a very difficult life. When I was about 17, 18 months old back in Kansas, she got pregnant, our house burned down, and we lived in what they call a coal shed. And there is this woman, 8 and 9 months pregnant, carrying that. I just think, how in the world did she do it? So, anyhow, Bill taught me a lot. He said that he had worked in a mine where some man had destroyed his house of cards. He destroyed Bill's belief in capitalism. And Bill, it wasn't that I was anti-communist. Well, in a sense, I was anti-communist. I went through a stage when I was even teaching and I was anti-communist. The reason for that was there was a Trotskyite man who had come into an organization where my mother and father had been working called Production for Use, PFU. They had a hall. The men would go up to Los Angeles and get day old bread. They did all kinds of things during the Depression. This was before I was married, long before. They even got, I remember they went and got butter one time, extra butter. And but this man was a Trotskyite. And I didn't know enough about communism to know. And he came into the PFU one night with a blackjack and destroyed that organization. The men, my dad went up to a place where they were growing grapes, and a man had given up his vineyard, and they went up there and put it into production. As soon as they got it into production, he took it back. But they endured an awful lot of very, very uncomfortable, unpleasant situations in doing that. And then when this man came in, so when I got out of college, I got some substitute teaching jobs, and one of the classes was the son of this man that had come in to the PFU with the blackjack. So he said, the boy said to me, what is communism? And I had had an economics course in college, and I said, it's an economic system. But I didn't know much about it. I had read a book called Red Bread, and another one I can't recall the title. Oh, Red Bread was one book. The other one was a primer for communism. So I knew a little bit about it. But all the time I was reading that, I was saying to myself, well, they're comparing themselves to the United States, so we must be the best. And I didn't know what situations in the United States were. There was one night that Mom and Dad took me to an organization, and I know it was a fascist type, Nazi type thing. I don't even remember the title of it, but I wasn't comfortable with any of the things they were saying, and I to this day can't remember what it was that made me so uncomfortable, but I didn't think it was right. And I know that Bert Wheeler and Hamilton Fish, who were in Congress, I later learned this, that they had been proposing fascism, like when Charles Lindbergh went to Germany and came back praising Hitler because Hitler had organized a lot of economy that was good for some people. But I didn't even know about the destruction of the Jewish people until several years later. So I was able to answer that young man. Then my mother said to me one time, well, do you know why those people in Sawtell are getting better welfare, better food things than we are? And I said, no. Well, it's because there's a nest of communists over there, she said. Interestingly enough, later on, she became very anti-communist. And I was in an insurance plan, a communist group here in Seattle, and they were all over the United States, called the International Workers' Order. And they carried an insurance policy for people, 25 cents a person for my children, and 50 cents apiece for Lou and me. And during the McCarthy period, the insurance commissioner in New York took our money because he said we were too fluid and we might use the money for something, I can't think of the word, it'll come to me. And I told my mother about it, and she said, why do you want to be like that? So anyhow, I've gotten kind of sidetracked. Well, I was talking about how Bill, in a sense, converted me.